Arthur, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've had a busy day. Did you ever think we would get to this point? Just from 4 years ago, January 6th riot at the Capitol, to now being here, potentially Donald Trump coming back?
No, I agree. 4 years ago, it didn't look likely, but lots happened in 4 years. We had the rest of the pandemic, we had a high inflation, we've had wars around the world. And so all that feeling within the US of a lot of change and churn going on has been magnified. And I think, if anything, that's exacerbated the feeling in some parts of the country that we want to try and return to a sense of, in inverted commas, normalcy. And they want, I think, an economic and social sort of order more in their own image. So there are many Americans who I think have felt like outsiders in their own country, and I think that is coming through. But there have been cross currents. There's no doubt the abortion debate has been pretty significant in this country. It clearly helped the Democrats in the midterms. We'll see tonight whether that gender gap has had as much of an impact as some people were saying. But certainly at the moment, if North Carolina and Georgia are closing off, the pathway of the White House for Kamala Harris is through the blue wall, and that could be a pretty tough pathway. But again, we've been here before on the night where you think it's a red mirage or a blue mirage, and then you wait for more votes to come in. So I'm not calling anything at the moment, but I can see how her pathways are narrowing.
And we can see that Trump's performing ahead of expectations and Kamala's falling below them in not just the presidential race, but Senate ballots, local congressional races. I do want to ask you, the former ambassador, you understand how important this role is and how delicate it can be.
Sure.
Kevin Rudd in this position now, he has been highly critical of Donald Trump in the past. At some point, if he stays in as our ambassador and we have Donald Trump in, which is now more than a possibility, that's just a liability that would not exist with another person.
Look, I think the first thing is that the important relationship, if we have President Trump, is between President Trump, Prime Minister Albanese. That is the most important relationship. And also, don't forget, there are people who've said some nasty things about the president who are now on the president's side. People like J.D. Vance, great example of that. So it's not the case.
He was wrong.
But I think,
from the Trump perspective.
But I think Kevin has also done a lot of work to try and row back into Republican waters, as it were, through the work he's done in the Congress and elsewhere. What I'm saying is the priority for the president is the relationship with the leader of government, not with the particular ambassador. This will all play out in good time, but frankly, if I'm President Trump, I've got much bigger priorities in Washington in the coming months than who is in the Australian embassy.
Look, I completely agree, that's true. I do think when we're talking about AUKUS, when we're talking about trade deals, we have the free trade agreement, I know, but that doesn't mean we're going to be immune from tariffs. If we're trying to get in their good graces for that kind of stuff, they're going to be looking at anything to shake us down on the other side. And I know it's not a nice thing to say about allies, but I think you've been in DC long enough to know
everyone, look, at the end of the day, relationships between countries are very transactional. But Australia has a lot to offer and has a good argument to make, whether it's on trade, on defence, where we more than pull our own weight. And they are the main considerations. The important thing here is that if there is a President Trump, that Prime Minister Albanese establish a good relationship with him from day one, not try to be anything other than what he is, but really stand up for Australia's interest and remind the Americans of the common values and interests that we share.
I think Kieran has a question for you.
Arthur Sinodinos, thank you for joining us on our coverage today. As Donald Trump looks like, we're not calling it yet, as you rightly point out, still votes to come in, but it looks at this stage encouraging for the Trump camp. I want to ask you, what should we expect from a Trump White House again, given the likes of John Kelly and others have been so critical of his first iteration as president? Who's going to be around him? How do we navigate the unpredictability of Donald Trump?
One of the big questions is, who will be his advisors? Will he listen to those advisors? Will he listen to the last person in the room? Will he go with his gut? A lot of it will be his intuition. And in terms of international relations, a lot hangs on how he feels about the person he's dealing with. He has a view of foreign policy that if he is unpredictable, it's actually good for deterrence. So we'll have to see over the next few years whether he continues to implement that sort of approach. When it comes to people who could be in the administration, from Australia's perspective, there are some candidates like Mike Pompeo, potentially Defence Secretary, Senator Hegarty from Tennessee, potentially Secretary of State, who would be good for Australia because they understand the Indo-Pacific and they understand our concerns. The other thing to remember, Kieran, is there is a very strong Indo-Pacific focus in the Republican Party in the Congress. They're strong supporters of AUKUS, they're strong supporters of Taiwan, and that will also be ballast, I think, in the relationship going forward.
As a deterrent, unpredictability can work. It's also something, and we remember from the first Trump presidency, where allies also didn't take it too well, like NATO. Trump had those issues with NATO demanding the Europeans chip in more. It worked. He did achieve that in the end, but it does make allies nervous, whether it be Europe or further afield, Arthur.
And I think my advice to allies and partners, for what it's worth, is demonstrate to the Americans what you are doing for yourselves, just as Australia is demonstrating what it's doing for itself through our increased defence spending. Japan is increasing defence spending. Korea is increasing defence spending. We're working more and more together in various groupings in the Indo-Pacific, AUKUS, the Quad, the other mini-laterals that we see. I think show the Americans how in the Indo-Pacific we're more than pulling our weight. In the case of NATO, I think you'll find that their back has been stiffened, particularly by the frontline states, the Baltics, Poland, and now Sweden and Finland, who understand the implications of what's happening in Europe with the Russia-Ukraine war.
Arthur Sinodinos, Annalise Nielsen, thank you both. Appreciate